Hi everyone, and welcome to the Modern Masculine Summit again. We're at our final session of the day before our open panel question and answer. And I have with me Mark Guay. He's a meditation teacher, a performance coach based in San Diego in California, combining his developmental psychology with the ancient art of the chakra system to unlock the unlimited potential and lead a greater life with greater purpose, energy, and connection. So I'm really, really happy to welcome Mark to our summit. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Helen, thank you so much for having me. It's truly quite an honor. I love how you're in Australia and I'm in San Diego, and I feel like we're just hanging out. So thank
Yeah,
you. This is wonderful.
yeah. And we have hung out a few times, and it has been absolutely fantastic to find such like minds on the other side of the world.
It always feels like a party with you. Yes. I enjoy it.
So we have met, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So now what we're here to talk about today, we've had discussions during today about the difficulty that we're facing in the current situation, how we're being
hmm
pushed into situations that are making us almost face things that we don't really necessarily want to face, things we've been avoiding. We've talked about suicide, we talked about the success story for men, status, and then we've moved into health and well-being. And part of that health and well-being and a real strategy for change along the pathway to really being able to be with yourself, for me, I think meditation is so incredibly powerful. And I know that you specialize as a meditation teacher, as well as your interesting take that you've also been an athlete. So you've got this incredible ability to be able to attach meditation to performance base. So I'm wanting you to just take the floor and tell us all about that.
Sure. Yeah. I like how you made that connection actually, because I often don't make that myself because I was first introduced to meditation actually as a freshman in college. And I
Mm.
was introduced to Zen meditation when I went to go visit my friend who had just moved from Japan or his family moved from Japan to Maui, Hawaii. And his father had practiced Zen for quite some time. And I saw him meditate and I asked him about it. And he told me a couple things and he gave me a book. And like all my life, books have been the window to so much opportunity. And so I started practicing meditation then. And I have a story I'll share, I think, in a little bit about my introduction to meditation and why it was something that I said, yeah, this is something I'm going to continue to do my whole life from there on forth. About 10 years later is when, or not 10, about 5 years later, is when I started becoming a serious athlete. In high school, I was actually an actor, a thespian. Right? And my wife and I actually originally met in acting school. Later on, when I became a triathlete, and I was actually aiming to get into the Olympics, and I competed on one of the most competitive teams actually in the United States, full throttle endurance in New York City. And that same mental discipline that comes from sitting my butt down, counting the breath, and noticing my thoughts and acknowledging them and becoming the witness to my thoughts that we'll talk more on in just a little bit, that same discipline, that disciplined focus is what helped me when I was running, when I was biking, when I was swimming. And even as I say this here, when I got to meet other athletes and learn about how the heck did they do what they did at such extremes. I know Lance Armstrong is not as popular of a name now, uh, but he did a lot of great things on the bike. And I distinctly remember him talking about uh, someone asked, what does he think about when he's on the bike? And his answer was the same one I gave. It was up, down, pedal stroke. It was just that simple repetition. And that is, I think, what the runner's high is. When you're out there and you're running, 32 miles or whatever, and like I did in Philly one time, and at mile 10, and then you go mile 12 and 14, and it's the same thing. You're just pitter patter with your feet, and it's really quite a beautiful way to get into flow state.
Mm.
And I think, that's really derived from a meditation practice. The cool thing is you don't have to get out there and run really long or cycle really long. All you really need to do is actually set aside a time and say, I'm going to practice meditation now, and give into the journey of it.
Mm.
Understand that it's not something that You do it once and you're like, I'm a meditator now. It's great. No, it's actually really hard. It's really, really hard.
Yeah.
I remember when I used to teach in New York, and I remember teaching meditation to my students, particularly to help them, relieve some anxiety for test taking and all the stuff of the social angst as a teenager. And it reminded me just how hard it actually is to sit still and try to not think for even a minute. It's pretty amazing what actually happens to the mind. And that's the journey. That's the relationship that I just absolutely am enthralled in, or enthralled with meditation.
Mm, mm. And it's right what you say, I mean, I have a meditation practice, and I find
You
for
have a very serious
maintaining,
meditation practice.
yeah,
Kundalini, that's a very
I
serious one.
yeah, I find it's really, without it, you get lost in the busyness. It just constantly brings you back to yourself. So it's almost about maintaining my
Yeah,
emotional connection to myself. And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
but I talk to people about it, and especially men who've never really experienced meditation before, and they go, oh my
Uh-huh.
God, it's torturous, or I sat down and it just, so, and
Yeah.
I get that it people have a misconception of it, don't they? That they think that it is just sitting cross-legged, instantly being able to just quieten the mind and do
Yeah.
the Buddha thing. And it really,
Yeah.
it's not that. It's a process of learning meditation, isn't it?
Well, the only way to reach enlightenment is actually to sit cross-legged. And you have to actually make sure that you sit in full lotus and really strain your knees and your hips. That's the only way to reach enlightenment, I think, at least. Joking. That was some New York sarcasm. Totally joking. I just love that though, because when we sit, we're like, this is how you do it. Especially Americans. We're like, this is the right way. And it's like, no, there's many ways to meditate. It's a mindset, really. This guy Mario Armstrong, who I adore. He's an amazing, amazing man over in New York City, and he is like Mr. Go 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 all over the place on the Today Show, talking about technology, talking with Oprah. I mean, this guy's crazy energy, um, and he talked about meditation actually, and he told me
Mm,
that that's what really helps him, particularly in the taxi rides, because he doesn't have to drive. He actually can drop in,
mm,
and even though like I think that's only going to get you so far. I think you need to do a little bit different of a practice as well. But even that right there was enough for him to calm his nervous system so that when he came to his next situation where he needed to be present, whether it was another interview or it was with his partner and family, he was able to actually be there because he had essentially recycled the energy, recycled all those thoughts and all the calamity that comes from the high-paced life that we live.
mm, mm. And that's really key, isn't it, what you're saying? So so what can people expect to get from meditation then, when you say he was able to
Mhm.
drop
Yeah,
in and that was then
sure.
able to kind of make him perform in this way?
Yeah,
So give us a background on, like,
sure.
what are we looking at, the benefits of meditation?
Yeah, great question. So first, I'd like to always have a clear delineation that when someone says I meditate or I want to practice meditation, I use the analogy that it's like working out. Someone says I want to work out, and when I used to be a triathlon coach, I would say, okay, well, what are you working out for, right? And if you're working out to try to run a marathon, that's a different kind of workout than you would do for, let's say, trying to get big muscles, right? Or to become a weightlifter or a bodybuilder or something like that. It's a different approach in terms of how you work out the physical body. The same thing with meditation. So inevitably, what it really comes down to is, well, what do you want to meditate for? Most people, it's for clarity, it's for focus, it's for calming the F down. Because
Yeah.
our life is pretty intense. I mean, funny enough, we have all these technologies to make our life easier, but yet, it's gotten far more stressful. And even with, the technology of social media, there's just always something, right? So our mind is constantly being redirected without our control, right? Social media addiction is a real thing. So
Mm,
what I always like to remind people is, what do you want to meditate for? So going back, well, let me say two things first, and I'm happy to go at length about both. The meditations that have become popular, that I've become popular for, are the ones that utilize the chakra system to really empower the self and what has become the popular phrase manifesting. right? And what I eventually found, or essentially found with that, is that Abraham Maslow became super popular for his human development movement back in the 60s and 70s. And when he created the self-actualization pyramid of what humans needed to become the best version of themselves, or what he called the self-actualized self, those same colors and the same things that were in each layer of the pyramid, he got those from the chakra system because he used to read and hang out with Carl Jung, who Jung was so fascinated with Eastern mysticism. And I saw that and I was like, oh, interesting. So I combined the two in these meditations that are on Insight Timer that you can get for free and listen to. And those meditations, they do a couple things. They get you to tune into the body, which we're a very disembodied culture, but you actually get to feel the different parts of the body. Whether or not you believe in the chakra energy system, it doesn't matter. You just think of that area and you visualize these things that are associated with those centers, or the same thing as the self-actualization pyramid that Maslow created. And as you move up the chakra system with these positive affirmations, you're dropping your brain into theta wave, which is the state that is between sleep and wake state, where the mind is susceptible to new learning. It's the state that we're at as infants, which is why we're able to learn so much. And so you're literally rewiring your inner talk. You're, you're rewiring your DNA to believe in your potential, because we all grew up in a life and a culture that doesn't necessarily tell us that we can be anything we want to be with real integrity, right?
Mm.
So that's the one type of meditation that's become really popular, that I've
Can
become really popular for.
I just
Yeah, go ahead.
mention as well,
Hmm.
with the chakra system, for anybody who's not
Hmm.
familiar with it, it's energy points through the body, isn't it? And they
Yes. Yeah.
are represented in a different kind of energy point at different points, from
Yes.
kind of the groin area up to the top, and
Uh-huh.
those colors coincide with a different kind of place and an energy. And
Yep.
so you're
Yep.
saying that then the kind of coloration with that is that collaboration with that is that this system that you're talking about, without mentioning the chakra system,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
it actually does the same thing.
It's the same thing. What Maslow did, now he's not alive, so I can't talk to him specifically, but I would put all my money on this. What
Mm.
he did is he was brilliant. He knew that if you said chakra to people,
Yes.
they would say woo woo, occult, devil worship, get out of here, snake oil. You
Yeah.
know, don't get away from your full of brush salesman. Like, no. So what he did is he just translated it in a way that was approachable, and it was brilliant. It's what any good orator, politician, entrepreneur, they just use the right words to connect to the right people.
Mm.
So the root chakra is the food, shelter, water. It's feeling rooted. It's feeling grounded. It's feeling safe, right?
Mm.
Maslow said, you can't think about what are my values, what are my beliefs, what change do I want to make in the world if you can't get your food, shelter, water.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty dang hard to be able to think of those things. So the root chakra, right at the base of the spine, is your food, shelter, water, which is the base of the pyramid that Maslow talked about, right? So, and we could spend hours, or it would probably
Yeah.
take a little bit longer to go through each, but happy to, if anyone wants to send me a message, happy to talk further about the different chakras and how they associate to the different needs that we have in our life to actualize our greatness. And for the people that are listening, I'm assuming if they're coming to this summit, that these are men and women that are on the journey to live out their greatest life. And if you're on that journey, then you definitely should be interested in meditation, my opinion.
Mm.
You also really should consider the chakra system and how it helps you really embody the things that a person needs to really step into their greatness.
Mm.
Okay, so going back, the one thing that I want everyone though to really come away with, that the basic element of meditation is when you sit, and even those people that you had mentioned, Helen, that they don't, like, their mind goes crazy when they sit, right? And it's hard, and I get it. I distinctly remember first time I was trying to do 40 minutes because the Buddha did 40 years, and I was like, okay, I'll do 40 minutes. And I remember 5 minutes went by, and it was, oh my God, the longest 5 minutes of my life, right? So which we could talk about how cool that is because it slows down time. But going back, what it does is you sit. I love this. I love working with someone who's brand new to meditation. You sit and I go, okay, imagine that, just focus on your breath and imagine a river flowing in front of you. This is the basic metaphor. We hear this all the time. And anytime a thought comes into your mind, you become aware of a thought, acknowledge it, and imagine it like a leaf that just moves along the stream. Most basic metaphor or visualization used to practice mindfulness meditation. But here's the rub that I just think anyone, really anyone, would be curious about, is those thoughts come in and you can't control them. So where the F do they come from? And how cool is that? And that just floored me as a kid. And it still floors me to today. Now, we can go into talking about soul, spirit, whatever, right? And I could definitely go that route and all that. But just the thought alone is, where does that come from? Is that you? Did I create that thought? And in that relationship, in that contemplation, that's the journey. That kickstarts the journey right there. Now, here's where it works in the real world. Or when you leave your internal world and you go external and you leave the house, right? You leave your meditation pillow. As you become more aware of your thoughts coming in, popular phrase for that is called the monkey mind, right? It's the it's the part of the mind that just wants to play and it just constantly takes you away from being fully present. Whenever those thoughts come in, you become aware of them and you go, okay, I see you, but not now. Thank you very much. Now that practice alone allows you to become the witness. And so you're able to step outside of that situation, of those thoughts, and be like, oh, look, there's Mark, and I see him trying to not think, to just be empty his mind and be present, and these thoughts are coming in. Interesting. Wow, that's strange. And it's this like next part of you, that the causal part, you can call it, that comes out, and it just becomes the witness. Now this is helpful when you leave the meditation pillow or the meditation chair, whatever, and you go out into the world, into your work, into your relationships. You're able to then not only be present with someone and listen fully to what it is that they're saying and not getting caught up in the next thing you have to do or the thing that you had forgotten to do or how you really need to pee. You're able to be really present with your clients, with your lover, with your kids, right? Especially when something happens that emotionally triggers you. Now, we're emotional beings, and I'm one to argue that we need to learn to feel more. I think the felt experience is something that's been ignored for far too long. But what happens is we become emotionally triggered by something, and so often we just become reactive. It's natural, right? And that's where meditation comes in, because you're able to then stop for a second, a nanosecond, and you're able to choose, how do I want to react in this? You're able to feel the blood boil of anger, and you're able to, instead saying, like when I used to teach, like my teenagers, instead of punching that hole in the wall, you're able to do something else with that anger. You're able to breathe with it, or you're able to just shake, or you're able to go scream into a pillow, or you're able to, redirect it in a loving way. If you're able to get to that stage. That's a hard stage to get to, don't get me wrong. The point being, though, is you're able to be in control of your human existence in a way that allows you to be better, essentially, right? And particularly people that are in high stress work, particularly people that have a lot of responsibilities, that's where meditation becomes really useful on a practical level.
And that's the mindfulness practice, isn't it? That moment, being mindful to catch that moment between the situation and the reactive self. So it's
it's incredibly easy to do.
Tiny section there where it's happened, and then instead of just boom, it's like that moment where you go, I'm going to take a breath, and I'm really going to be mindful of my next kind of way, because mindful gets banded around. We've had this discussion before, this mindfulness, and I'm just being mindful, and be mindful. And what would you explain to our audience? What does mindful look like?
That's a great question. So I just would say that being mindful just simply looks like becoming aware of why you do what you do, right? And this is, we can get really deep here into the different parts of the self and, you know, uh, in a relationship, for instance, and, you know, with men and women, a lot of times what really happens is we get into these arguments, and what what happens is the little boy, the little girl, if you're in a man and a woman relationship, they're not feeling loved, they're not feeling seen, they're not feeling safe, right? And so we can get caught up in that whole little sub-personality reactivity drama triangle that leads to these fights, which is incredibly unfortunate. But if you become aware of that voice, and you become aware that, oh, I actually just want to feel loved right now,
Mm.
right? You're able to actually call attention to that. You're able to own it. That's the hard part. Actually own your part in the drama, in whatever is going on. That, I think, is becoming mindful. Not easy to do, though, to be 100% clear. It's a lifelong journey, and I, for one, am, by God, still a student in that. You know, and even when, I loved, for a little while in my life, I was kind of obsessed with like who's most enlightened and wanting to go meet and talk to the gurus of the world, you know? And I was very happy to really come to find out that we're all trying to figure this out. We're all trying to work. Anyone who says that they've really worked it out, I mean, unless they, even those who live in a monastery, to be clear, like they even have these teenage level type of, you know, this teenage level type of drama. Like he ate more bread than I did. Like it's really hysterical, the type of stuff that comes out. So we're all trying to work on it.
Yeah.
But the reality is that when we're in the day to day and we have these responsibilities, being parents, being business owners, coworkers, members of the community, and also trying to take care of ourselves and have some fun, by God, uh, mindfulness comes in where you're able to really uh, be fully present with yourself, but in a way where you own your own bullshit. Pardon the, I think we can
Mm.
swear on this. And also, choose better, choose more wisely.
Mm.
Like one small example could be learning to say no and actually own a boundary that you have where actually, no, I'm sorry, I can't take that commitment this week. I'm really sorry, right? Actually owning that because you're becoming aware that you're someone who constantly wants to please people and wants to so bad, but the reality is it's actually stressing you out so much that you're not actually being going to be able to be mindful for your kids or for your parent or for your wife later on. That's where mindfulness really comes in. It's not just simply uh, becoming aware of your thoughts in the moment. It's the bigger picture behind it.
That's amazing. I love the way that you just normalize this to everyday being, because I agree whenever
That's
anybody.
because I'm an everyday being. I'm a pretty normal
That's
guy,
right.
and I want to be. I don't want to be. I don't care about. Yeah. Anyways, we'll go
Yeah,
off on that
but
note.
there is a lot of kind of like, oh no, I'm there, and I always find that a bit of a red flag, because I just kind of think, oh, okay, but because we can't ever have all of this worked out, because we actually don't
Yeah,
know what we're going to be dealing with next week that could push a completely new button that we didn't even know existed. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
in my journey of parenting,
Mm,
and I see myself as quite emotionally mature and fairly together in my practice.
mm,
And there's days where I'm like, you've got to be a saint to live around here to not feel like this, like
mm.
you do. It doesn't stop you from getting angry or from having the emotions. It
Yep.
doesn't stop all of that you just get into Zen, and you can't not acknowledge the emotion that comes from healthy living, like you say.
Yeah.
There's all of this stuff going on. We just have to constantly try to perfect it.
Could I call attention just to one small thing here that I think is often ignored in these conversations about mindfulness,
Yeah.
meditation practice? It's becoming more popular now, but it's the element of spiritual bypassing.
Yes.
And I just always want to, we don't have to talk too long about it, but just what sometimes happens for people that are like, okay, I'm going to start meditating, and they do 2 hours a day, they do an hour in the morning, hour at night. Fantastic. Wow, that's really great. And you're certainly going to reap a lot of benefit from that type of practice. But what sometimes happens is you actually become so aware of your emotions and you become so connected to source And it's beautiful. My God, having these mystical, interconnected experiences where like, I'm like that tree. Oh my God. Like it's amazing, right? It's so beautiful, blissful. But what sometimes happens is we forget that we're human. And we're a soul and a human at the same time. And so sometimes there's this spiritual bypassing that happens that completely bypasses any sort of trauma, any sort of bad stuff that people say or do. And especially in the world of, always positive, keep it on the positive, we suppress this part of ourselves that will come out one day, and it does through shadow.
Mm.
So I just always like to bring up this element of spiritual bypassing, that don't forget that we're human at the same time. And that's why for me, my my biggest message to the world is actually integrate your emotion, don't suppress it. Because
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the felt experiences, we can learn so much more uh, from
And as
learning how to
well,
actually
it's
navigate
coming.
it.
It's going to come, isn't it? It's
Well, it
like
does. It does, and
trying
that's
to
what we
kind
see
of
with
contain
men in
water that
particular.
you keep
Yeah,
adding a cup of water to. Eventually, you
yeah,
cannot contain it. It
yeah.
has to go somewhere, doesn't it? You know.
Oh, completely. Yeah,
Mm.
and just on the emotions, I've been doing a lot of research on that, and particularly with men, because I actually lost a student of mine right when I retired from teaching. One of my last students, who I definitely played a father role to, unfortunately ended his life just 3 months after high school graduation. Terribly sad. And where was I going with that? Every time I bring that up, I get a little choked up. So I'm like, where am I
Yeah.
going with that?
Mm.
Um, but he was like a lot of boys growing up that always had to keep it cool. And I talked with my students about this, and I studied anthropology as an undergrad in school, so I was aware of it. But I didn't realize until entering into the men's work world just how suppressed men have been in terms of emotions, particularly sadness and anger. And there's a great documentary and body of work called Raising Cain, where he goes to actually, in a long-term double-blind study, he takes a look at young developing boys in different areas. So a really nice mix. And he goes to just see how the natural emotive quality of being human is suppressed, and later on argues and why it needs to come out. So for instance, to use my former student, uh, boys are taught not to be violent. And in fact, what this man argues, I forget his name at the moment, Raising Cain doctor or researcher, he argued that boys need to learn to play, that play violence is actually really helpful. And so what happens is they don't know, boys growing into men don't know what to do with this anger that comes up. Women too, don't get me wrong, but I'm particularly just relating this here to men.
Sure.
And so what ends up happening is it comes out in other ways. And unfortunately, I strongly believe that that's what's leading to right now 70% of the suicides in the United States are adult men. And I think of that student, and I think, my God, if he would have learned, if we had a culture that actually taught him in a productive way, constructive way, what to do with that anger and how to actually use it as a source of power, as subtle energy that flows through you and wants to help you, I think he would have likely found another way than turning that anger inwards and
Mm.
being violent to himself, which inevitably is one way to look at suicide. So
Mm.
that's my shtick, just real quick in terms of the emotions.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
That's come up a lot, Mark, over this space of me doing all of these interviews. It's been a recurring theme, the fact that men have an aggression and like
Yeah,
a
we're
bay.
warriors. We're meant to
Yeah.
protect. Like on a DNA level, that's what we were supposed to do.
Yeah. And
And
so there's a point where that has to be recognized and not labeled bad so that it can actually be allowed to be healthily
right,
expressed rather than suppressed and then come out in ways that we're seeing, which are
yeah,
devastating both for the people around them
yep,
and for themselves.
yep.
So yeah, it's really important work. I agree with you.
There's a movie that I don't know if you've seen it. That I can't think of the name at the moment, so forgive me. If someone wants it, I get it later. But it's the extension of William Wallace and his fight in Scotland. I don't know if you're aware, if you've seen this movie on Netflix, but there's a scene where they fight, and the Scots fight against the Brits, and they win. and it's a gory battle. It's incredibly gory, and they're in the they're in the bog, and they're all muddy, and there's tons of blood, and it's really gory. But what I love about this movie is that right after the Brits retreat and they leave, the surviving Scots, what they end up doing is they look around, and there's about, it's maybe 30 seconds, but they look around, the camera pans, and you see the men suffering, dying. And then you see the men who are alive and they're okay. They somehow survived without really much of a scratch. And they acknowledge each other. It's called The Outlaw King. That's the movie. And what I love about this movie is they look at each other. And I'm even getting emotive as I think about this because the men just erupt into these tears. Like it's a calamity of tears flowing through them. And they shake and they scream and they howl. That's the type of emotive expression that we need, because as the Body Keeps the Score teaches us, we need to really learn to embody that power, that energy, or otherwise it's going to go somewhere else in a destructive way. And I love that because these men are weeping in a way that I really, really hope more men embrace, because it's just, oh my God, it's just so powerful, so powerful.
Yeah. And it's interesting, as a meditation teacher and as an
Yeah,
athlete,
yeah,
you're combining all of the rich parts of the human being, of the emotion, and then the
yep,
quiet,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know? So I think that's amazing that you're able to kind of really embrace everything instead of saying, no, you've got to, come into center and just be calm and peaceful. And, it's refreshing, because everybody can have a point where they think they're doing it wrong. I'm doing it
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
And both life and meditation, you
yeah.
know. So what do you
Well,
say to
don't,
that? People who tried meditation and go, I can't do it.
well, here's the thing, and this is maybe where I stand out just a little bit in the difference, and I'm open to being wrong here, but what I believe is that we are just as much a part of nature as any animal or living being out there, right? The Buddhists call it all sentient beings. And when you go into a meditative state, most people, all people really, inevitably feel a sense of interconnectedness. And it's a very blissful experience I had referred to earlier. But where I go with that is, wow, we actually, if we really are a part of that, if this flesh and bone and skin and nervous system and all of that is on a molecular level part of the world, interesting. What can we do with that? As opposed to, a lot of times meditation is that the only good things are being quiet, being still. And in fact, if you're howling, if you're screaming, if you're crying, if you're getting angry, like you need to meditate more. There's like this spiritual shaming that happens. I call
Yeah.
bullshit on that. I really do. Don't
Thank
get me
God.
wrong. Sometimes you need to, like, yes, you do need to sit and you do need to be quiet. But
Mm.
at the same time, you need to feel and you need to express. And so I think both work extremely well. And here's the difference, and it's very clear. It's a choice, right? If something happens to you and you get triggered, and as a man, for instance, and you get really triggered, and you and you beat someone up, and let's say worst case scenario, you really hurt them, perhaps kill them, and you go to jail for that, all out of this, emotional reactivity. Now that sounds dramatic, but no, it wasn't. I had students who did this. And one student actually went to jail because he bashed a student's head into the locker literally 5 seconds after I talked to him, and he was such a teddy bear, walked out of my door, and then that happened and he went to jail. So this emotional activity is really real. Here's the difference though. When you practice meditation, you become aware of the emotion. Then you can choose how to enter it into the world, what to do with it, why you want to feel it. So if you have a bunch of anger, and I could walk through this exercise if you'd like. It's very simple, or I can give you the link to how I wrote, or an article I wrote on it. Is you feel it flowing through the body. You allow the body to feel, and you howl or whatever it is that you need to do, whatever anger or whatever feeling it is. This being anger here, I'm thinking about, and then you connect it to your mind, and you connect it to why you felt emotionally charged. And then you think about how I can, and what changes I need to make in my life, what conversations I need to have, what do I need to do to have more of an intimate understanding of this emotional charge that I had, right? And that is utterly beautiful. So like when we do men's intensives and we go out into the woods and we're howling, like last time we did it, we're up on the top of the mountain and we're howling, and my God, it was amazing because it was, we all got done howling and it was three, two, one. These dogs in the campground started howling. And then you heard these coyotes started howling, and it was like a ripple effect through the valley. And I was like, yeah, baby, that's it. Yeah, baby. And like all the men were like, we're just loving it. And we're wild, and it was just that wild, primitive, wild man that a lot of men need to tap back into, women too. And it was just utterly beautiful. So again, just to summarize, meditation gets you to choose. Instead of being reactive, you can be proactive or constructive, which I think is so utterly valuable.
Can we put that article of yours onto your speaker page,
Yeah, of
so
course.
that people
Sure.
can read about that? So
Yep.
anybody who's listening, we'll put a link to that article that Mark's talking about on his speaker page. So if you go to the speaker page and look down, you'll find that. And if there's any questions, of course, just contact me and I'll send you something. Now, Mark, tell me, we've got
Yeah.
people listening who have gone, I'm totally new to it. What you're saying is awesome. I totally agree with you. What is something that if somebody's finding themselves in a place of difficulty right now, but they've never done it before, that they could take a couple of minutes? Can you take us through something for a
Yeah.
couple of minutes
Sure.
where
Yeah.
it would be of assistance at difficult times?
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So what I'm going to do is actually a very, very, very simple type of meditation that involves breath work, breathing. And the breathing just helps you focus a little bit more. It gives us something, gives the mind something to think about as opposed to nothing, because that's incredibly difficult to think about, right? And let me explain what it is first, and then I'll guide us through just a few minutes here so it can drop us in. And this type of activity, what I love about it is you can do it in a meditative state, meaning eyes closed, where you're going internal, but you actually, the goal of it is to take it external. And so the type of breath, I'll verbalize it here and then I'll move us into it, is as you inhale through the nose, if possible, inhale through the nose and you imagine a ball of light coming down from the forehead all the way down below the feet. I know you've heard of this before. And as you exhale, you imagine that ball of light moving all the way up the back of the legs, through the spine, to the back of the head, to the top of the head, and then inhale back down. And so what you do is you inhale, ball of light down the front, exhale, ball of light up the back, and you do that a few times, and then you call attention to the mind. And what I love about that type of visualization is it's something that you can do, and it's amazing when you do this with your partner in particular. Anyone who's having uh, issues or just wants to connect more deeply, more intimately with their partner, go ahead and do this type of breathing as you're talking to that person. It's pretty amazing how online your body comes, how online their body comes. Now, we can go into the subtle energy and the why and how what lineages talk about this, but I don't like to go there unless people ask. I just like to talk about try it and then tell me if it works.
Mm.
So, make sense? Should we do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's do it. So I'm standing. If you're sitting, that's fine as well. But what I want you to do is to come to a meditative posture. So that is a relaxed yet disciplined attention. So that could be like me, just a slight bend in the knees with my hands down at the side. And I'm closing the eyes here. I find this type of meditation easier with the eyes closed. And I'm stacking the spine, so I'm pulling the belly button to the spine and stacking the spine so that I'm alert and I'm not going to fall asleep, especially if you're sitting. And just call attention to the body here. That's what we always want to do first. How does your body feel in this moment? And call attention to the mind. Does the mind feel racy? Is it calm? Is it really empty? Just call attention to the mind without any judgment, just feeling, acknowledging where you're at right now in your day. And then go ahead and return to a sense of stillness if you found yourself rocking a little bit. And I'm standing here and I'm just keeping my knees slightly bent, stacking the spine. And I'm going to call attention to the breath. So I want you to imagine that there's a ball of light that appears at the forehead. And as you inhale through the nose, that ball of light's going to slowly descend to below the feet. And then exhale that ball of light through the mouth. As you exhale, that ball of light's going to move up through the back. So let's do this a few times here. Inhale through the nose. Imagine that ball of light moving beneath the feet. Exhale, imagine that ball of light now moving up behind the back to the top of the head. Inhale through the nose. A little bit longer here. Imagine that ball moving now to below the feet. And then exhale through the mouth. Imagine that ball moving up through the back to the top of the head. Inhale through the nose. Filling up the belly. Exhale through the mouth. That ball of light to the top of the head. And exhale all the way out. Inhale through the nose. Filling up the lower back, the sides. Exhale through the mouth. Press the belly button to the spine to empty out all the lungs. Inhale through the nose. And do this now on your own a few times, at your own pace, as you imagine that ball of light circling around your body. You may notice that your skin becomes warm. You may notice that an inhale is a little bit longer. Try to even them out. Inhale, ball of light moves down. Exhale, ball of light moves up. And as you continue to visualize this ball of light moving with your inhale and your exhale, just go ahead and call your attention now to the mind. And if you forget the ball, that's fine. Just notice what thoughts come to mind. What feelings? Are there connections between the way your body feels and those thoughts? And just for a few moments here, as you continue to breathe, every time that a thought comes into your mind, just call attention to it. Hold it there. And as you exhale, just imagine it leaving. Thank it, send it on its way. Every time that you become aware of a thought that enters your mind that takes you away from being present, being still, just acknowledge it, send it on its way, and then thank yourself. Remind yourself that you just noticed it. You became aware. You became just a little bit more mindful. Take an inhale here. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And when you're ready, Go ahead and open up your eyes. Hello.
So beautiful, Mark. Oh my goodness.
So something that sometimes happens is even something as simple as that brings up a lot for someone. And so again, I always like to connect it to the body. So if you really did feel a strong emotion, particularly with a lot of men that are coming to this, I'm assuming they have something thick going on in their life,
Mm.
right? And so something very powerful may have come up in that simple meditation. And if that's the case, whenever you're done meditating, I just always shake out the body, right? And you could squeeze the body if you want, but just shake it out just a little bit and just allow it to jiggle just a little bit there. And that just helps sort of release any of that tension, because what we want to avoid is keeping that inside. We've done a good job of stuffing things in for far too long. And so
Mm.
what we want to do is just try to move that throughout the body. Tony Robbins does this, by the way, too. It's always funny seeing these little things. If you see him, he always says, change your state. And what does he do? He jumps up and down, right? That's where the rebounder is really popular.
Mm.
Well, Americans needed a trampoline to be able to get them to move their body more. Whatever, it's great. It works. I'm happy. And I just love seeing the connections between East and West. And thank goodness, because we all need to learn these things.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny with meditation, I just always feel like I've just re-entered a room after I like just doing that. I've
Yeah.
been in a frenetic energy, of course, organizing the summit and so even my meditation lately, I'm like, okay, let's get this done. So
I'm
even
with
just
you. I know.
doing that with you just then, like I feel like I've just, there's a different level of grounding on where you are. Your feet are firmer on the ground, your body's firmer in the seat, and you are really here, and that's a powerful thing to learn in that few moments just then that you just gave us, Mark. Amazing.
Thank you,
Amazing.
Helen. Thanks for that
Mm.
reflection. I appreciate it.
Mm. I've just absolutely loved talking to you. We have just like zoomed through the time. I can't believe how quick it's gone, because it's been so incredibly informative and so interesting that so many of the things that have come up, I've already discussed with a lot of the other speakers,
Hmm.
things about anger, things about, emotions, things about breath work. All
Hmm.
of these things are repeating and repeating over the course of this weekend. So it's really amazing. And what we're going to do, I was going to try and fit in another meditation of yours, but we've run out of time to do it now.
Hmm.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on the end of today's card. So after yourself here, we're now moving into an open panel of Q&A with some guests that we're answering questions with. And then after that finishes, I'm going to put in your meditation. And this is a meditation that is on the app, Insight Timer. Is that
Hmm.
right? The one that's on Insight Timer?
Yes, they're actually based out of Australia, believe it or not.
Mm. So we'll put that on at the end of the day, and it's a 15-minute meditation, and it's purely based around men's work, which is so incredible. It's a really deep, very moving meditation. So I'll put that on, and I thank you for giving us that gift to play to our participants in the summit. It's a really lovely thing to end the day with, I think.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, and thanks again for putting this together. I'm really excited for this weekend, and it's just it's something I wish I had when I was younger, and I'm just so grateful that more and more men and women are coming together to talk about these things in
Mm.
a way that, what I do in my life now is I'm trying my hardest to create the world that I want to see, or that I want my grandchildren to play in. And this type of work that we're doing right here is creating a ripple effect on a generational level. So really appreciate you for putting this together, and thanks again.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. I'm absolutely thrilled with the support that came to me as soon as the concept was born. So I appreciate, and you've been really beautifully supporting me in the background as well from this. So I really, really appreciate and honor you for your presence and your knowledge that you shared with us all. So we're going to move from Mark's amazing kind of like grounded, chilled out state into our last panel for the day, which is the Q&A, to give a big roundup on what we've experienced in day one. And there'll be a Q&A box, which is all anonymous questioning. So you can ask whatever question you've got over any course of today. And we look forward to having you back with us here in a couple of minutes. So thank you again, Mark. We'll talk soon.
You're welcome. Take care.
Cheers.